Welcome to another edition of the Beyond the Blade podcast. I am super excited to have Chris Mirabile with us today. He is the founder and CEO of NOVOS, which is an excellent brand related to basically longevity, anti-aging, but also a lot of short-term improvements that you can get from using this product line. As you know, I'm also the founder and CEO of Hydrology Wellness, which is a facility here in Miami dedicated to all of those great biohacking, wellness, anti-aging modalities that are now available to us as patients and as practitioners. So we're super excited to have Chris with us, and we're going to let him basically introduce the product to our audience.
Great. Well, it's fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit, Chris, about your background in terms of how you got involved in NOVOS, the creation of the product line, and the evolution.
Sure. So my story actually goes back a long time to when I was just a kid. So when I was 12 years old, I got interested in exercise and eating healthy and working out. And I was healthier than my classmates. And so it was that much more of a surprise to me when I was 16 years old and I was in New York City on a school trip and I suddenly had a seizure. And I woke up and I had blood all over myself because I had severed my tongue from the seizure. Wow. They rushed me to the emergency room and they found a larger than golf ball sized tumor above my left ear. And so they had to do emergency surgery within just a few days. And as you can imagine, it was a life-changing experience. It completely transformed my perspective on life, how fragile it is. You know, as a teenager, most people don't really think that way until they're getting much older. Yeah. So I viewed it as a gift. It was a gift given to me to be able to see how fragile life is and to make the most out of my life and to do whatever I could to try to be as healthy as I could for as long as I could. And so that planted a seed at an early age to look at health not only in terms of the short-term benefits, which is what, whenever we hear about different health advice or modalities, it's oftentimes just focus on the short term, right? Like, let's lose weight really fast, or let's gain muscle really fast, or improve libido, or improve your focus at work, right? Everything is really short-term focused. But I was always asking myself, well, if I want this short-term goal, is this actually going to be good for me in the long term as well?
Right.
And the answer is it's not always good for you in the long term. And sometimes the answer is ambiguous. It's not so clear.
Right.
And so fast forward to about 10 years ago, I came across a scientific study in the journal Cell called The Hallmarks of Aging. It's now considered a seminal paper in the field of longevity research, and the scientific community refers to that as kind of like their North Star. And those original researchers, they just published a new version of that paper a year ago. And that paper essentially, it identified what's known as the mechanisms of aging, or the hallmarks of aging. A simple way to think of it is these are the biological causes of what makes us get older in the first place.
Right.
And this was eye-opening for me because it was, for the first time, I realized that we're starting to uncover what causes us to get older in the first place. And it's not something that's just like written in stone or written in our genetics, or it's not something, you know, that religious where it's like, oh, this is predetermined how long you will live. No, we can actually have an impact on if we're going to speed up our aging and pass away younger or get sick younger, or if we slow down our aging. And so that was really the beginning of me being aware of longevity research, and it was empowering for me because the number one risk factor for diseases like brain tumors or cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, you go through the list, the number one risk factor is aging. Wow. So for me, I wanted to address aging to then reduce the risk of me getting another brain tumor or disease for that matter.
Right. No, that's fantastic. You know, a lot of our audience is very much interested not only in the plastic surgery world, which is, you know, a very very invasive method of changing your body, right? And so the reason that Hydrology Wellness exists is to try to help people from the non-surgical aspects, how they can improve their overall wellness, improve their overall life, and work on the entire body. Now, there are certain situations where surgery is indicated, and that's what we offer. But from the perspective of NOVOS, tell us how you ended up developing that after doing all of your research and reading all the articles. How who who came on board, the scientists and the evidence behind the creation of NOVOS.
Sure. So just for full disclosure, I'm not an MD or a PhD. Sure. I'm a very scientific-minded person, but I studied business at NYU Stern. But in my personal life, in my free time, I was always going to scientific papers. I mean, that's how I came across the paper in the first place. I was on PubMed all of the time trying to learn for myself and integrating different insights I would derive from these papers into my own life, and then tracking it with different devices like the Oura Ring and the Apple Watch and so on. And so I always had that mindset, but I also realized that if I was going to really make an impact on aging, I needed to bring true experts in the field on board. So I started networking with scientists at Harvard and MIT and the Salk Institute and NYU and so on, and met with people like Dr. George Church, who invented genome sequencing in the 1980s. He's a tenured professor at Harvard and MIT. Wow. He's a legend, and he came on board as a scientific advisor, for example. Wow. We brought on 7 people, PhDs and MDs, out of these esteemed institutions that are true experts in the field of longevity and how we can essentially slow it down, or maybe one day in the future reverse it. We can't do it yet, but maybe in the future we can. And so together with them, we started to formulate a product. And my vision, my goal was to address all of the hallmarks of aging, or these biological root causes of aging, simultaneously. So there's 12 of them. And nobody in the world was doing this. And the question was, well, why? And the first answer to that is that everyone in the field was traditional biotech or pharmaceuticals or academia. And so for biotech and pharma, you need to create something that addresses a disease if you have any hope for FDA approval, EFSA approval in Europe, and reimbursement from payers. And so it just wasn't financially worth their while. And then why weren't natural products in the field? It's because it was too sophisticated. This is hardcore science, and nobody was really aware of it in the field. So that I saw as an opportunity, and it was admittedly selfish. I wanted to create something for myself, and to give to my family, my loved ones, my friends, for them to take to improve their health. And when I started telling people about this idea, they got so excited. They said that they wanted it themselves. I realized that it's probably more than just my close circle of friends who want this,
Exactly.
So then that's when I realized that maybe there was a business opportunity here as well. And so I brought these scientists on board. We created the first formula to address all 12 hallmarks simultaneously. That's our flagship product, NOVOS Core. And then we've added a couple of other product lines on top of that, but the foundation of NOVOS really sits with NOVOS Core. That's where we've done most of the scientific research to validate the product, which we can talk about. And it's a daily drink mix. So it's 12 ingredients. It's the equivalent of almost 20 pills if you had to take pills each day, right?
Wow.
When you hear about people taking dozens of pills a day,
a handful of pills.
No one wants to do that, right? Like, I'm in the field and I don't want to do that. So it's all about convenience and simplicity and giving you the benefits that you would get if you were living like that, but actually making it into a tasty drink mix. So you can form a habit around it.
And I'll full disclosure, I've used the product myself for over a year. My wife has used the product. We've loved it. I mean, I've really much enjoyed using it. I was talking to Chris before we started the podcast. My wife has pretty much stopped using coffee and has switched to the NMN product line. We can jump into NMN. This is super interesting conversation as well. But it's been highly beneficial. So we are offering the product at Hydrology Wellness here in Miami. And if you're ever visiting us here, you can stop by and pick it up. Tell us a little bit about, like you were mentioning, a little bit about the evidence and some of that information.
Sure. So first, the ingredients that we use, they're backed by more than 400 scientific studies. This is for NOVOS Core alone. Each of our products are backed by dozens of studies, but Core has more than 400 scientific studies behind the ingredients. But then that's not enough, because when you combine ingredients, you might get something called a dysergy, where instead of a synergy, it's the opposite. You actually counteract effects. biology is very complex, which you know as a doctor, right?
Yeah,
and it's much more complex than most people assume it is. They hear about a healthy substance and then another healthy substance, and they say, let's just add both of them together and you'll be even more healthy.
That'd be great.
And the fact is that scientific research has shown that you can actually counteract benefits, or in some cases, you can actually have a negative effect. So we wanted to then show that the benefits are preserved or actually even amplified by combining the ingredients, and that we have synergistic properties. So the way we've done this is a number of studies, typically at academic labs.
Okay.
First study we ever ran looked at DNA damage from irradiation. So if you think of irradiation as, for example, UV rays from the sun, we were able to reduce the DNA damage, oxidative damage, by as much as 77%, which the lab that had done this had done $7 million worth of studies prior to us with pharmaceutical drugs, even ingredients in our own formula. Wow. And they never saw an effect like this. They called their CEO before they even called us because they were so excited by these results. So that was the first indication that we might have a synergistic property of the combination we chose. The second study we ran was looking at something called cellular senescence. So these are zombie cells that accumulate in our body. It's one of the reasons our skin wrinkles. Yeah. And these senescent cells, they release inflammatory molecules that can cause nearby cells to become inflamed, and then also might turn senescent as well.
Right.
And so we were able to show that we could reduce senescence, the size of the senescent cells, by the same order of magnitude as this prescription drug known as rapamycin.
Yes.
Rapamycin is like the gold standard in the longevity world, right? And this is what scientists look at, and they compare everything to rapamycin because it's extended lifespan in every animal species they've studied. And so that was really promising for us when we saw that. The next study, we looked at DNA damage from chemotherapeutics. This was done at University of Bologna in Italy. And they were able to show that a moderate intensity chemotherapeutic and a high intensity chemotherapeutic, they go beyond oxidative damage, like I mentioned before for the irradiation. They actually cause single and double strand breaks to the DNA itself. Imagine if you have a car and you're slicing it down the middle. Like, that's how intense the damage is to the DNA. And we were able to prevent that damage for a significant amount of the DNA. We'll be publishing that study soon.
Wow.
Then we did a study at the Salk Institute, which is a very highly regarded biology lab in California. And we were able to show that we reduce a process known as oxytocin ferroptosis. And this process has been studied a lot over the past decade, and it's been found to lead to diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, and some metabolic disorders as well, related to like type 2 diabetes and blood glucose levels. And keep in mind, this is in vitro, so it's cellular studies, but we were able to show that we could reduce the oxytocin ferroptosis by more than half as much as this prescription drug that's in R&D right now, specifically targeting that process. And our ingredients are all natural. So that was really promising. Yeah. I'll be quick here. So a couple of others. We did a mouse study, which we haven't published yet, but I can just say that we had very significant results on extending lifespan, which is promising for us. Because
of a mouse.
Of a mouse, yeah.
Very cool.
So, awesome. It's a mammal, and it's difficult for us to study human lifespan because we live so long, and it would take decades and tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to study. And by the time we get the results, it's too late for a lot of people. So we can look at animals, and we can see, are we improving their lifespan as well? And it's all about not relying on one single study, but it's about the combination of all of these studies, and is the evidence pointing towards a high likelihood that this is going to have favorable lifespan effects on humans, right? We won't know for sure in biology, right? I mean, that's just the way it is in biology. But we can look at the evidence and see, is there a high likelihood? So we did that. And then with humans, we did a case study where we provided NOVOS Core and NOVOS Boost. So NOVOS Boost is the NMN product you mentioned. So the two of those products, and we measured people's rate of aging, which we can do with a blood sample and look at what's known as the epigenome, and we can see how fast or slow somebody is aging at this point in time, largely based on lifestyle and environment over the last 6 months of your life. And we were able to show that after 6 months of use of those two products, we were able to slow down the rate of aging for 3/4 of the participants by the equivalent of 1 month per year.
Wow.
And 0% of participants sped up their aging. which you would expect some people may have sped up because they were drinking too much or they weren't sleeping well, they had stressors in their life, right? Out of all of the people, 0 sped up. So that gives us a hint that maybe we're actually protecting people that would have sped up otherwise.
Exactly. Wow. This is exactly why we wanted you to come on the show, because this the volume of information is so much, and there's so much to understand about it. And if you really want to learn, everything that you're saying, you really got to get into the science. You got to get into the basic science, into the biology. And so it's very impressive how we're able to bring all of these great minds from all of these amazing institutions and really work and break down the concept of aging. Talk to us. This is super popular, even amongst my own friends that we're in our 40s now, and all the guys are just wondering, what is this NMN situation? What is NAD? Should I be going and get NAD infusions through the vein, or should I be taking this oral supplement, or what's the efficacy? And so maybe you can just jump in a little bit and talk about that.
Sure. So NMN became popularized by a scientist at Harvard named Dr. David Sinclair. He's well known for his work with red wine and that molecule resveratrol, which, I have my own opinions on whether it actually does anything or not, but that we'll put aside for now. NMN is a precursor to a molecule known as NAD, which you mentioned. Yes. NAD is involved in the Krebs cycle. So for those who remember from high school biology, the Krebs cycle is where we're converting the foods that we eat into energy for our cells to survive and perform their functions, right? So imagine converting carbohydrates or fat into energy so that we can move and we can think and our heart can beat. Right. So that all happens with the Krebs cycle. NAD is a critical component of it, and levels of that decline as we get older. So by taking NMN, a precursor, so something that then produces the NAD or gets converted into NAD, you can increase NAD levels. And this has been shown in animal and human studies that you can increase NAD levels by taking NMN. Now, a natural question is, well, why wouldn't I just take NAD?
Right.
And the reason is because our stomach breaks it down. We can't absorb NAD orally. We can absorb NMN orally and then lead to higher levels of NAD. And then you asked about injections. So yes, you can get NAD injected, these infusions, and that's great to get your levels up to a high point.
Okay.
The only issue is that over time, then they start to go down again. So that's where taking something like NMN can actually keep them elevated the whole time. So you can think of it in 2 ways. Either you take a relatively high dose of NMN to start just to get your levels up to a good level, and then you maintain a lower dose for a while and you'll stay pretty high. Or if you want and you just want to very quickly get levels of NAD very high, you can get the injection.
Got it.
It takes time. It's not a quick injection. It takes
it's an infusion. Yeah.
It's an infusion. So it takes a while.
Yes.
Some people have reported a little bit of muscle aches from the infusion.
Definitely.
So if you want to avoid that, you can go straight to taking the NMN formula. Exactly. One other thing to say about NAD is that not only is it good for energy production, it's also a precursor for these enzymes called sirtuins. So enzymes are essentially proteins in our bodies. And these proteins, they can repair DNA damage. So when you think of these 12 mechanisms of aging, DNA damage, or genomic instability is what they call it, is one of the 12 mechanisms of aging. So that's where NMN plays a role in aging. Also, the Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondria, and mitochondria are the power plants of our cells. And as we age, one of the mechanisms of aging is your mitochondria. You have fewer of them. And those that you have aren't producing as much energy anymore. So that's where NMN fits into that equation of these mechanisms of aging.
Now, putting NMN into the core, into the powder, into that very easy to drink powder, that's something that is not possible because of the interactions with all the other elements?
No, so you actually could combine them. We chose not to combine it for a couple of reasons. One is that the NOVOS Core formula, when we were putting it together, we were looking at the amount of research around the ingredients. And every ingredient in NOVOS Core has been studied for decades. It's been shown in human studies to have positive health effects. It's been shown in animal studies to be able to extend lifespan. So we were very confident in every single ingredient in NOVOS Core.
Got it.
We were also confident in the NMN product, but it's newer. The research is newer.
Newer.
So there was that element where we wanted to make sure the flagship product was long term, in a good place. And then NMN specifically was very expensive when we first started to produce the product. It still is quite expensive, and we wanted to make our products accessible.
Yeah.
And so this would have made our product like $150 a month, and that's just more expensive than a lot of people could afford.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and that's great that you made it much more accessible to everyone. You know, I have the same ideology, the same mindset. Is that, you know, in my practice in either in hydrology or in plastic surgery, I always try to make these treatments accessible to patients, you know, as much as I can. Everybody deserves to feel better about themselves. Everybody deserves to, to have confidence, to have self-confidence, and to live a healthier life.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that you made NOVOS much more accessible to people is amazing. I want to touch a little bit more about the 12 hallmarks that we mentioned. I know you just spoke about genomic instability. Maybe we can touch on others that you found to be really important in terms of, you know, combating. We spoke about, you know, mental, Alzheimer's and all of these other disease processes. But what would you consider to be, you know, some of the other important hallmarks?
So all of them are important. They all interact with each other, right? So if one gets, for lack of a better word, damaged, then the other ones are also going to feel a repercussive effect of that.
Yeah.
With that said, there are some that are particularly interesting in terms of the impact that they can have relative to the other ones. So, for example, one that has a lot of attention in the scientific community right now is the epigenome. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned earlier that we can measure biological age. Mm-hmm. We can measure biological age by looking at the epigenome. So let me explain what the epigenome is.
Yeah, please.
So you have your genes. We just talked about your DNA damage is genomic instability. And so your genes are what is hard-coded by your mother and your father, right? Mm-hmm. And these exist in our chromosomes, our XX or our XY chromosome. Right. Those genes, you can think of them as almost like a piano, right? So all of the keys on the piano are your genes. Mm-hmm. Then the music that's played on that piano is like your epigenome. It's essentially which genes are turned on and which genes are turned off. And as we age, different genes turn on that shouldn't turn on, mm-hmm. and different genes turn off that shouldn't turn off, right? Yeah. And so there are patterns that emerge from this. And the way that we can measure biological age is by looking at the epigenome, and scientists have created these advanced algorithms, some of which are utilizing AI because it's more sophisticated than the human brain is really able to conceptualize. But with advanced mathematical and statistical models, they can essentially identify if somebody is biologically younger or older than they are chronologically. Wow. So you might be like, I'm 40 years old chronologically, mm-hmm. but biologically, according to multiple different tests, I'm typically getting results in my late 20s. And so that would reflect the lifestyle that I live and how I take care of myself and my exercise and my stress management and my sleep and my supplementation and so on. Mm-hmm. All of that combined leads to a epigenetic expression, right. Different genes turning on and off, that is that of somebody younger than a 40-year-old.
Right.
So what's interesting about that is that you can think of the epigenome, which genes are turned on and turned off, as having a direct impact on essentially how old our organs are, and by extension, how well they perform.
Exactly.
So there's actually, this is getting much more technical, as if we haven't been technical yet, but this is getting more scientific, and this is more biotech. But there are researchers that use these enzymes. Again, we talked about enzymes before. Yeah. Specific enzymes that a scientist in Japan named Yamanaka got the Nobel Prize for. Wow. These Yamanaka factors have been shown, there's 3 of them, that when combined in certain ratios on mouse organs, for example, mouse liver, mm-hmm. that they were able to reverse the age of the mouse's liver. So taking old mice, they were able, and the livers were quite old and they weren't functioning as well. They were able to reverse it. And now scientists are trying to apply that same technology to human eyes to help people who are going blind from old age to be able to see again. So those are the elements that are getting a little bit more futuristic, forward-thinking, but reversal of aspects of aging, not whole body aging. We're not up to that, but aspects of aging.
Yeah.
So that's really a very promising aspect of the mechanisms of aging. It's the epigenome.
Very cool. Very cool. Where do you think you're going to be in like 5 years from now? Like what do you have on the horizon for NOVOS?
Great question. So I founded NOVOS as a public benefit corporation intentionally so that we could do more for the public interest than just focus on profiting. Right. And of course, as a for-profit business, we need to do that. But by surviving and thriving, then we can do that much more for the public. And so we've launched free resources for people. We started simple with blog posts. So we have more than 250 articles written by PhDs and MDs where some are very basic and some of them are more complex, but you can learn a lot about the field of longevity and how to slow down the process through that. Yeah. Then we released something called Face Age, which your audience might be interested in. So Face Age is this AI technology where you can take a selfie with your cell phone, and then AI is able to tell you how young you look, how young your eyes are, your eye bag score, your skin wrinkle score, skin uniformity, pore size, and so on. Wow. And so, and then we don't leave you hanging after you get your results. We then give you advice for free ways to be able to improve each one of those scores. So that's called Face Age. Cool. If you go to novoslabs.com/faceage, or you search for it on Google, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to link that,
And then we have most recently, just over a month ago, launched a mobile app that's completely free. And it's called NOVOS Life. It's on iOS and Android. Okay. And NOVOS Life has three main features at this point. So it's the simplest version of the app. We have big plans for it. Yeah. But right now we can tell you, first of all, your biological age estimation based on AI technology, and it's all based on a survey. So we sell a blood test that is looking at your epigenome, and that's the most accurate available. Yeah. But something that comes close is this free survey. It was created by this brilliant PhD out of Stanford University. Her name is Dr. Soo-In Lee. She won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in mathematics in Korea. And she's the first female to ever win this award. So she's fantastic. And we integrated her algorithm into our app. So that's completely free. 24 questions, and then you get an estimate of your biological age. The second feature is we look at your lifestyle. So based on questions, we can understand where you need the most help to be able to slow down your aging and what you're doing quite well already that's good for slowing your aging. Great. And then the third feature is we have essentially like a ChatGPT chatbot within our app, but it's trained on longevity information. So you can ask it questions about health and slowing down aging, and it will be able to give you personalized recommendations. And soon enough, we'll have wearables integrated like Oura Ring and Whoop and Apple Watch and so on. And all of that will be integrated into the experience.
Wow, that sounds super interesting.
So
very
so
cool.
I guess I didn't really exactly answer your question.
No, you did.
Where we see ourselves going is continuing to provide these resources for people so that they can improve their health. My vision is that we want to add more than 1 billion years of healthy life to humanity, and we're not going to do that simply by selling supplements. We have to also offer free resources where people can take it into their own hands. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And then second is we're a biotech company. So most supplement companies are really marketing companies. They're seeing what ingredients are trending on Amazon, and then they try to market theirs very well. Right. We're a team of scientists doing brand new research, making new discoveries, and then selling it direct to consumers rather than going the pharmaceutical route. So because we're all natural. Yeah. So I see ourselves in 5 years from now making an impact on a lot more lives, providing more free resources, and having innovative new formulas that can even further impact the aging process.
Yeah. Oh, this has been fantastic. If you haven't seen that biological aging test, it is available. We also offer it ourselves at Hydrology for our clients that can benefit from determining biologic versus chronologic age. I think it's a super hot topic. I think a lot of people really want to know where they're at.
Yes.
And I think that that's great. That there's also some other tools that you guys are creating that are not, not really having to be based on a sample. So that makes it much more, attainable to a lot of other people that may just be, interested in where they're at. We want to thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. I think that we can do a lot more content with you and a lot more information we can provide to our audience. And again, we want to give our audience more information on how they can find you. So maybe you can let us know what are the best channels to get some more information from NOVOS.
Sure. So novoslabs.com is the website. We're on most of the social networks like TikTok and Instagram and X and so on as NOVOS Labs.
Okay.
Then I have a personal website called Slow My Age, where I share the data about my biological age according to many different technologies and tests and so on. Cool. And my personal lifestyle I report about as well on the website. So
Nice.
it's slowmyage.com. Okay. And I'm on Instagram and X and TikTok as Slow My Age.
Slow My Age. All right.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to start checking out Slow My Age. I got to go from 40 to 20. Let's see what my score is. We actually may do that. Just check it out. But thank you so much, Chris. It's been great having you, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, thank you.